Welcome to the Memberships and Courses podcast, which is sponsored by WishList Member. Learn more and get free membership training by visiting wishlistmember.com/free. Now for the regular podcast.
Welcome to the Memberships and Courses podcast. My name is Tracy Childers. I'm really excited about this episode because we have a real treat for you today. A legend in the direct response marketing, Brian Kurtz, comes to us with over 40 years of experience. Brian, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Great introduction. When anybody calls me a legend, it usually means that they want me to, okay, you're a legend, keep moving. You know, it's like I was given a Lifetime Achievement Award once, like 10 years ago, and I felt that was my invitation to get out of the business. They were inviting me to leave the business. And the thing about 40 years experience is a difference, and I hope that I satisfy this. It's that there's a difference between 1 year's experience for 40 years and 40 years of cumulative experience. And I you know, when you say anybody who's giving out their credentials always say I have this much experience. But I always like to temper that a little bit and say, you know what? Not everybody can have a cumulative experience. And I've really concentrated on that in my career. And to do that, you have to be totally connected to everybody around you during your 40, in my case, 40 plus years. You have to be connected. And the only way to connect is to contribute. So that's always my motto. You know, I always say that I hate the word networking, and I've been known as like this networker over the years. Yeah. But I hate the word because it kind of implies a glad hander and, you know, patting people on the back and having the most Facebook friends and all of that. And I don't see it that way. I see it more as you contribute to people on a regular basis. And I got to believe, you know, based on when I look back, I've contributed a lot to a lot of people over my 40 years in terms of content, in terms of favors, in terms of deals, in terms of doing business with them, all of that. That's contribution across the board. And that's how you make really deep connections. And that's better than networking, because then you're going a mile deep with more people as opposed to going a mile wide with many more people. You know, I do have a decent sized audience that I blog to every week and all of that, but that's satisfying, you know, having some quantity there. But it's the quality of the relationships that really matter. And so, you know, I took your introduction and picked it apart a little bit, but, you know, 40 years experience is, you know, 40 years of cumulative experience, and being a legend is not always so good if you're being put out to pasture, but hopefully I'm not either of those.
Well, we're definitely not going to put you out to pasture for sure. So I do want to dig in a little bit on this 40 years because, you know, 40 years, you could do all kinds of different things, but the things that you've done, in my opinion, and probably many, many others, are incredibly significant. And so I won't completely do this justice, but I grew up in maybe the information product age for the last 40 years or so. I was a little bit younger when I started just because my father was into it. But you were a key person in building a company called Boardroom Inc. and Bottom Line. And it's like, I have all these memories of these newsletters and stuff that my dad had purchased. And then as I graduated from college, I started ordering some of these things. Can you just tell us a little bit about what that organization did and what it was?
Yeah, so I got to Boardroom in 1981. It was the day Ronald Reagan was shot at the Washington.
Wow.
So March 30th, 1981. And back then, no internet, no email.
Yeah.
You know, no funnels, except we had funnels. They weren't called funnels. But we had direct mail, and direct mail was the killer app. It was the medium of choice. And it was a medium that, you know, today, looking back, you know, people look at direct mail as like this foreign thing. And how did people do that? And why would you want to, you know, use paper? And why would you want to pay postage? And, you know, all of that stuff. Well, we were dealt our hand and we didn't have digital content. So, all of our content was print. All of our marketing was direct mail. Or we did other things too. We did some TV, we did some radio, we did some space advertising, print advertising, but direct mail, carried the load for Boardroom. And Boardroom was an iconic publishing company that was 100% direct response marketing and mostly direct mail. And so, looking back, I wrote my book Over Deliver in 2019, and my chapter 3 is called How Paying Postage Made Me a Better Marketer. Now, that doesn't mean that I think everybody should be doing direct mail today. And I said before we turned the recording on, I'm not grandpa at the picnic saying, you young whippersnappers, you better do like I did. And this internet thing isn't going to catch on. I'm not there at all. I mean, today, being a marketer today is the best time ever to be a marketer. All the technology at our fingertips, all of that. But what I meant by that phrase, how paying postage made me a better marketer, it taught me a discipline that is not absent today, but it was such a requirement because you're paying postage, printing, you're paying the top copywriters big money. You're not going to make as many mistakes. You're not going to hit send, meaning you're not going to send it to the post office to mail it as quickly as you would today hit send on an email. And so the discipline that went into direct mail, it follows in today's environment as well. Now, you don't have to be as disciplined and precise, but if you are, you'll be a better marketer. And that's why I say paying postage made me a better marketer, because the discipline. One of the things I think I mentioned in my book was that there was an urban legend going around when email was getting popular in the 2000s, and there was an urban legend going around that the post office was going to start charging postage for emails. And to me, that was exciting because that would weed out all of the imposters, right? If you had to pay for every email, you would have to have the discipline to make sure every message, at least attempt every message to be targeted to the right audience at the right time. And you wouldn't just do slap shot marketing and just wing it because, email is so cheap that you can throw it out there and see what sticks. And which is a positive in some respects because you can get in business very, very quickly. But the opposite is true too, that you can make a lot of mistakes very quickly and sabotage your list or sabotage what you've built over a period of time with just the wrong message and because you hit send too soon, basically. So I think that, so I use that urban legend of, and it wasn't true, of course, that the post office was going to charge for emails, but I thought it was instructive for me to use in speeches and places where I went to speak at the time. I said, do your email like you are paying for it, because then you'll do a better job and you'll have more, you'll pay homage to the copy, and you'll hire the right copywriters, and you'll care about what you send out much more. And that's going to bode well for the long game, the long term. And that ties into what you do, Tracy. I mean, memberships and renewals of memberships and subscriptions and renewals of subscriptions. To me, that's the essence of direct response marketing. Yes, going out to cold traffic is always exciting, and bringing in new customers is exhilarating. But what's really, to me, exhilarating is getting the renewal. Because that means that you delivered on a promise, you created an environment where people wanted to stay with you. And then once they stay with, and this with your membership models, that once they renew once, the odds that they'll renew 2 and 3 times goes up exponentially. So, we had at Boardroom, we had these newsletters. Bottom Line Personal was our big consumer newsletter. We got up to 1 million print subscribers at one point. It leveled off in later years at about 400 to 500,000. That's nothing to sneeze at for a print newsletter.
It's amazing.
$39 a year. But when I looked at the financials for the company, it was all about the renewals. It was all about, and then, I have an expression that, marketers sell subscriptions, editors sell renewals. And that transfers into all aspects of direct response marketing. It may not be editors per se, but the content providers, the product innovators. That's where the renewals come in. Getting the first order, it's not easy, but getting the first order with really good marketing that represents the product in a good way, getting them into your world, romancing them, over delivering to them, making them feel like family, all of those things that you know more about than I do in the membership world. To me, the most satisfying thing in my business today with my memberships and my masterminds and all of that, it's always the renewals. The renewals give me the most satisfaction. And I learned that at Boardroom in a subscription business. And one of the biggest regrets I had at Boardroom is that we didn't really understand ascension models. Now, we weren't in the prehistoric age, so we probably should have understood ascension models. Right. But we didn't have like the $39, we didn't have the $39 newsletter to the, $1,000 course, to the $1,500 coaching program, to the $20,000 mastermind. We didn't have any of that. In fact, I did a session at a big event I did in 2014. And one of the copywriters who was on that panel said, yeah, Boardroom, you guys sold $1 billion worth of product, $39 at a time. Now, right. We were really good at the renewals. We were really good at the cross-selling and the upselling to books and other products. So it wasn't like we were not getting an average order that was higher than $39, but we never got into even a course for $2,000 or anything like that. It just wasn't necessary in that environment, I guess. And today, launching a company without some kind of ascension model is usually a mistake. At least a right. cross-sell model that, gets you equal amount of money on the second or third sale. And that could be a renewal as well. But it's all about the lifetime value. We were all about lifetime value too. And we were all direct mail and all $39 offers. But when you can do it with higher ticket, that was the thing I started learning over time as I got involved in direct response marketing online. But again, my roots in direct mail and subscription marketing really have stood the test of time in terms of my career and how I've been doing my marketing online like I did it offline. And I think now one of the things in my book that I talk about is the concept of O to O to O. Offline to online to offline, and the idea of toggling between the two, because you have to go in and out. And the thing is to have only one medium. Like if your entire business is on Facebook or it's on Amazon, you're cruising for a bruising. You could be out of business in a heartbeat. So you have to diversify, even if you're all online. But if you can diversify online with some offline physical product in addition to digital product, it all works into a multimedia, an omni-channel, as they call it. I call it multi-channel. But that's what my premise is. It's that you need to be multi-channel. You need to be diversified, just like your portfolio. And I have blog posts that I've written about this. That it's just really important. You wouldn't be in one stock with all of your savings. And so, I don't go around saying everybody should be in direct mail by any means. But if direct mail could work for you on the back end of an online digital business, by all means, especially, most digital businesses have postal addresses of their customers because they paid with a credit card and they have the postal addresses. And the fact that they're not being used, it's an underutilized asset in the digital marketing world. So that's what I bring to the party a little bit based on my experience at Boardroom into the online world. And also I think that, I really believe that the idea that you need to have a real diverse, you don't have to be everywhere. Advertising opportunities are now infinite, online and offline, but you need to have enough diversity so that it looks like you're everywhere, even though you can't be everywhere.
Sense,
yeah. So I'm just a proponent of all of that. And I really learned all that cutting my teeth at Boardroom in the trenches of a direct mail publishing print business. And now I spend time, as a student in mastermind groups that I pay for to be a member of, that are all online marketers, because that's where that's where all the marketing action really is. But I can
Right.
bring a lot of the wisdom that I've gained over the years to those groups and come up with ideas for them that they wouldn't have thought of, in terms of creating a physical product off their digital product, creating a specialized direct mail campaign to their best customers. When we did direct mail at Boardroom, it was millions of names, third class
Sure.
mail, big mass mailings. Direct mail comes in all sizes and shapes. If you have a list of your best customers who spend the most money with you, you can have a direct mail campaign of 20 people, and you send Federal Express packages to them,
Yeah.
and that could be a direct mail campaign specialized to your VIPs. That's direct mail too. So I think that, direct mail, its applications have changed, but how it works and how it can work within a digital business, I think, is one of the special sauces I can bring to a mastermind group, both my own and to the ones I'm a member in. And it's all because of my training at Boardroom.
Well, you mentioned your book that you has recently written in 2019 called Over Deliver, and I want to dig into that in just a bit. But let's dial back for a minute. You said you came into Boardroom in 1981, right after. How did you even get there? Like, is that something that you always wanted to do? You were studying it, and
I was not voted in my high school most likely to be a list manager. No,
okay.
However, it ended up being a natural progression.
Mhm.
So when I was a senior, I'll have to go back I'm a senior in college. I'm an English major. So
Okay.
What does that mean? I was learning how to read and write. And I was going to pursue one of three career paths, I thought. One was to be a film critic. I was the film critic for my college newspaper. I applied to New York University's film school in film criticism. And I got in, and I was thinking about going. That would be spending more money on education that would maybe lead to a career, maybe not. That was one. Two was to become an English professor.
Okay.
I wasn't in love with classic literature. I wasn't a Chaucer, Milton, Shakespeare kind of guy. I was more 20th century Nathaniel West and 19th century, Herman Melville, 20th century, John Steinbeck, that kind of stuff. So I thought, okay, I'll be an English professor. So I applied to a bunch of schools, got an offer to go to Idaho State University in Pocatello, Idaho, for a PhD program, master's PhD program in English. That was two. The third possibility had nothing to do with anything academic. It was to be a baseball umpire. I had umpired my whole life. I still umpire now. And so I was going to go to the umpire school that prepares you to become a major league umpire. That's a long road, but I thought maybe I'd do that. So I did none of the three. Basically, I graduated college. Also, there was always like the possibility of law school in there, because everybody thinks they're going to go to law school because they have nothing else to do. Then they become miserable lawyers usually. Not that bad lawyers. I mean, they're miserable in their careers usually.
Sure.
As lawyers, because they just went to law school out of convenience. So I'm not saying that's true for everybody, but I know more miserable lawyers than any other profession. So some miserable dentists too, but not all of them. So when I graduated college, I just hit the pavement in New York. I grew up in the New York City area. I figured I'd go into publishing. So I hit the pavement. I went through, I would map out my day, the night before in the library. This is 1981. So I had to go to the library, get a book, map out literary marketplace where all the publishing companies were listed in this big book.
Oh, wow.
And I'd map out by address all the publishing companies. And there were, hundreds of publishing companies in New York.
Mm-hmm.
So I would go and just drop my resume off at each of the offices. And it was basically a pound the pavement exercise to see what happened. And I got a job off the street at a play publisher, because I would take anything at that point, and it was anything. It was $9,000 a year to work in amateur leasing for this play publisher. And amateur leasing was they had the rights to all of these plays. It was called Samuel French. And if anybody who's listening was ever in a play in their high school, they would get these scripts for the play,
Right.
The Odd Couple, or it would have Samuel French on the scripts.
Okay.
So I would arrange for the royalties to be paid. So, a high school teacher in Dallas, Texas is doing The Odd Couple. We have to pay royalties to Neil Simon. I would send them the bill for the royalties when they talk about it, and we'd send them the scripts. Collection agency, basically, but it was publishing, and so I was close to something. But making $9,000 a year, I was living at home. And so what happened was a headhunter had taken interest in me just because he liked me for some reason. And he said he has this company that he thought I would be a great addition to. And it was Boardroom. Boardroom was a young company in New York at the time. The founder, Marty Edelston, was, a dynamic direct marketing guy. He had sold direct marketing space in publications and yellow pages, and he was just a go-getter. And he had published this newsletter, Boardroom Reports. He was just publishing Bottom Line Personal. He was publishing a tax newsletter. And so this guy says, the headhunter says, I'm going to get you an interview at Boardroom at some point. For what? I don't know. And the job that was available when I went to interview was for the in-house list manager. So that's why I said I was most likely in my high school yearbook.
Yeah.
So what a list manager is the person in direct mail. This was we're still talking, this is 1981. So Boardroom's lists were the subscriber lists and the book buyer lists were great lists. Great because they were very responsive.
Yeah.
All the names were sold through direct mail. So other direct mail companies wanted those lists to mail. And most companies who had a list like that would give it to an outside list manager. That's all they did. They managed your list. Boardroom, because there was no advertising in our publications, there were newsletters. There was no advertising revenue, but the list was the only way to get to the audience. So Boardroom kept the lists in-house. So this job was we weren't the only in-house list manager, but we were one of very few. So it was a unique position to be in of a very powerful list, the list you can't get anywhere else but at Boardroom. And I was the list manager for that.
Wow.
And the beauty of the list is that everybody would be able to mail it, from, Money Magazine to Consumer Reports to Brookstone catalog and Sharper Image catalog.
Oh, yeah.
To the National Republican Senatorial Committee fundraisers, to St. Jude's Hospital. Everybody could mail the Boardroom list. They were I called them mail order junkies. They were people who bought through direct mail, through very targeted copy written by the best copywriters. And so I learned renting the Boardroom list in the marketplace, all about the audience, all about direct marketing. And I came up with unique ways to sell the list. Most people, and this is relevant to how I got into my career as sort of a list segmentation guy in direct marketing today. I'm still seen as, people see me as a copywriter coach, which I'm not. They see me as a direct marketing guy. I am, but the reason why I'm a direct marketing guy is that I was a list guy. List to me is the most important element, more than offer, more than creative. You have to get the list right. You have to get the audience right first. Absolutely. And so I used to go to like a list broker who represented a lot of different mailers who would rent the Boardroom lists, and to entice them to recommend the Boardroom list, I would show them all of the mailing pieces that we used to get new subscribers, to get new buyers, because that was the essence of the Boardroom customer. It was the promotion that got the name. And I learned that at a really early on, like within a year at Boardroom, I saw the connection between the promotion that got the name, the quality of the name, and then what the name could mean in a universe of mailers and promoters. I mean, it's the same. Fast forward to today. What's an affiliate marketing deal, right? If you
Right.
have someone who's going to market your product on to my list, they know me, they know my style, my writing style. I'll be able, and the best affiliates are always the ones that are really aligned with the product they're selling. So they have their own unique copy and bonuses and everything that goes with it. It's the same principle. Affiliate marketing was not invented by an internet marketer. It wasn't invented by anyone except the fact that, it's about affinities. It's about creating affinities within different niches. And you know a lot about niches.
Yeah.
So that's a long-winded way of saying I started as a list manager at Boardroom. And the interesting thing is, like, a year or two when I was still at Boardroom, early on, a job opened up in the editorial department. I always thought I was going to be a writer. Remember,
Mm-hmm.
I was going to be, a film critic. I wanted to write. And I was so enthusiastic and embedded in direct marketing probably after 6 months, when I saw what this was all about, I was hooked.
It
I
just
was hooked on
clicked.
direct response marketing, especially because, it's like it's like the feedback is incredible. Like
Yeah.
either your package and your marketing program worked or it didn't. And the audience told you. And, if you're looking for feedback on what you're doing, direct response marketing is the only way to be. So I said no thanks to the editorial job. I stayed in list management, then eventually became the marketing director. I became the executive vice president of the company, had an equity position, ended up staying for 34 years, helped
Wow.
build the company with Marty. And it was an amazing ride. It was a ride. You said before we turned the recording on that you become a kind of a historian yourself of the
Yeah.
direct response industry. I hate to say this because it makes me sound old, but that's okay. But I lived through direct marketing history of sorts. Now, only from 1981. There was a lot of history before that. But a lot
Sure.
of the people who I was working with in 1981 had made their way in the 60s and 70s, like Gene Schwartz and Gordon
Right.
Grossman, people you might not have heard of, Dick Benson, amazing copywriters and consultants at that point in 81 who had been around for 20 years at that point. And Boardroom was a learning organization. Like, Marty would hire the best consultants, the best copywriters. Thank goodness, right? I mean, I was a kid in a candy store. I mean, I had people on this who are listening never heard of Gene Schwartz. They should have heard of Gene Schwartz. Gene Schwartz, one of the best copywriters of all time, one of the best human behavior psychologists of all time, one of the best copywriters of all time, authors. He wrote a book called Breakthrough Advertising, which I
Yeah,
have the exclusive rights to.
I was just gonna say, I'm fascinated with this book, Breakthrough Advertising by
Yeah,
Eugene Schwartz. I think back in 2007 or so, my friend Perry Belcher recommended it to me. And now I think they're going for like $300 to $500 on eBay, but yet you own the rights to it now,
yeah,
right?
I own the rights with Gene Schwartz's wife. So when I
Okay,
left
that's
Boardroom, I took the
fascinating.
right. Yeah, I took the right. And but again, there's a lesson there too, because my relationship with Gene Schwartz it was mentor mentee for the most part. He was the
Sure.
mentor,
Uh-huh.
but it was a symbiotic relationship because I helped him with his list work. He had his own publishing company in addition to writing copy for Boardroom and Rodale Press and a lot of other people. He had his own, and I blogged about this many times. But he had his own company, and I always say, your mentors choose you. And so I just
Right.
gave my services to Gene in terms of, you know, um, uh, all of the list work that I did for Boardroom was applicable to what his company was doing. So I just did that for him, and no expectation of anything in return. But what he gave me was so much better. He gave me himself. He gave me himself as a teacher, as a mentor, as a friend. Um, and then, Boardroom had the rights to Breakthrough Advertising. We didn't publish it big time back then. We just published it in small quantities for people in the industry, and we gave it away almost. And then we saw it on eBay for $950 at the time, and they were very rare. And so we still didn't publish it. When I left Boardroom in 2015, I asked for the rights as one of the things that I asked for when I left, which I got. And I renegotiated a royalty arrangement with Gene's wife. Gene was already dead for a while, but Gene's wife Barbara and I negotiated a partnership, and I've had the rights since 2015, and I sell it for $125 a book. Yeah, it's worth more than that, but it's an amazing book. It's a classic book. But I think more than that, it shows again contribution to connect. I mean, the question a lot of people ask me is, how did you get the rights to it? How did you, Brian, get the rights to it? And it actually wasn't difficult to get the rights because of what I had established with Gene back in the 80s and 90s as my mentor. It was a natural thing that I was the guy to be the shepherd of this book. There was no one else.
Yeah, totally makes sense then.
So yeah, I mean, I think that I don't know if that was, I don't know if I even answered your question about, how I got to Boardroom and being a list manager, but
there's so many things that you had experience on, throughout that. I could probably ask you questions for hours, but I really did want to jump into your new book, Over Deliver. And I wanted to start out by, reading a quote from, Joe Polish, who I think is a mutual friend of ours. And he says, Joe says, if you want to learn from one of the greatest marketing minds alive, read this book. Straightforward, and then this is a key thing. This is the first paragraph of the foreword of the book, written by Jay Abraham, who many consider as one of the greatest marketers of all time. He says, I rarely endorse books, let alone write forewords. Why? Well, I don't want to sound brash, but I don't want my reputation for preeminence being associated with mediocre material. But writing a foreword for this book is an exception I'm ecstatic to make. I am putting the full force of my reputation and endorsement on the line for Over Deliver by my dear friend Brian Kurtz. That's a pretty powerful opening paragraph for the foreword. And I'm here to say that I've read the book and I think it's amazing.
Thank you.
So many questions about it. One is, did you ever think in your mind, man, I know I have all this experience, but maybe I'm not qualified to write the book? Or did you just always no, I have to do this?
That's a great question, because you're always, look, we all go through imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
We all go through those bouts of doubt all the time. And I always thought that I would want to write a book, but it was always out there, I'll write a book someday. Everybody always says I'll write a book someday. And when in 2015 or 14, when I started my weekly blog, I realized that, writing to an audience, and at that time it was hundreds of people and mostly friends and family, right? But it was great, a great feeling. And it's not because I never had a desire to have a New York Times bestseller. I don't have delusions of grandeur, none of that. But I realized that writing for an audience that appreciates you and you appreciate them, it's a great thing. It's like it fills me up. And I think I would say it would fill up anybody if they ever did it, because it's not because, I mean, people do acknowledge me, they say they love my blog and they write to me and all of that. But, I call my list my online family. I treat them like family. I don't bombard them with sales messages all the time. And I just send them content. This started in 2014. And then I left Boardroom in 2015. I kept the blog going. And then I wasn't thinking about a book really. And then my good friend Craig Simpson contacted me. And Craig Simpson, wonderful guy. He's a direct mail savant. In fact, his business is based. He's worked with Dan Kennedy. He was the only guy that Dan Kennedy really trusted to do a conference on direct mail. So Craig's the real deal when it comes to direct mail. And he contacted me, I guess it was 2016 or 17. And he said, Brian, I'm writing a book. He already had written a book called The Direct Mail Solution. And he says, I'm writing a book called The Advertising Solution. And it profiles 6 greats of advertising / marketing. And the 6 were David Ogilvy, John Caples, Claude Hopkins, Robert Collier, Gary Halbert, and Gene Schwartz. And it was on copywriting, marketing. And he said, Brian, you're the only person I'm going to ask. I'm going to do the book regardless. The only person I'm going to ask, but I'd like you to write it with me, or at least, co-write it or edit it or whatever. And I thought about it because I said, I hadn't thought about writing a book. And so I give a lot of credit to Craig for Over Deliver, which came a couple of years later, because he gave me the confidence that I could actually be part of a book project. It was actually the book was his voice in the book. But I edited it. I bulleted so much of it. I did a lot to make the book great. But he did a lot of the heavy lifting because he went into the volumes of books of those 6 legends and pulled the stuff out. So he did the heavy lifting. I did the heavy editing and the heavy work on it. And it's interesting going back to Jay Abraham, I asked Jay Abraham to do a blurb for the book and a few other people. And they said, Brian, I'll write a blurb, but it's not you. The book's not you. And they constantly talk. They weren't putting Craig down at all. It wasn't like it was badly written, but it was Craig's book with me. And so that was the thing got in my mind. I said, well, I need to write the book that I was meant to write. Because, and Jay was a big reason for it. That's why I went to him for the forward as well. Because Jay has always been like my conscience. Jay is the guy that says, if you've done it, you have an obligation to teach it. He drummed that into my head for years and years. So Jay is just one of so between Craig writing the book not being in my voice, and then Jay telling me, when I'll do a blurb for this book. When you're ready, he didn't say he was going to write the forward, but he said, when you write your book, that's the one I really want to look at.
Wow.
And so, and then the fact that you read the paragraph from the forward tells you that I guess I delivered on over deliver. But I think that the thing that I took away from all that was that, and then I thought the book Over Deliver would just be like my blogs. Like I'll take my blogs, I'll put them in a book, and that'll be it. That would be half-assed. And then I was on a podcast like this with someone else who gave me an idea to hire a developmental editor. I didn't even know what developmental editor meant. And a developmental editor is not a ghostwriter. It's somebody who can accumulate your thinking and your writing and organize it in a way that you could create a unified whole, meaning a book that goes from chapter 1 to chapter 2 to chapter 3. And so I remember the first time I got with my developmental editor, I found a great one. And she and I got together and I basically printed out, 4 or 5 years worth of blogs, and I sorted them by chapter. This is the copywriting.
That's cool.
And it was actually it was a lot easier doing that than just putting the blogs and just randomly putting them in a book. And then Hay House approached me to publish it, which was a dream come true. I had their editors look at it. And so it developed into a real project after that. But to answer your original question, I never thought that I would be writing a book. It was something out there in the ether. After the advertising solution, I said, I think I owe it to myself and the people who have mentored me, especially, to write a book. And then coming up with putting together the pieces to get to the book through my blog, through a developmental editor, Jay Abraham, coaching me, a lot of other people coaching me. And that's how Over Deliver happened.
Well, here's this is basically just a subtitle on the cover of the book. And it says, build a business for a lifetime playing the long game in direct response marketing. And that really spoke to me because I think a lot of times people just like, oh, I'm just going to do this because that's the latest thing. And you talk about everything is a long game.
Yes. And yeah, that's why I wanted to be on a podcast with you, Tracy. Your whole business and your whole business philosophy is based, and that I'm a Venn diagram with everybody. Our overlap in our Venn diagram is that overlap, and we have other overlaps, I'm sure too. But we have that overlap of retention, of membership, of subscription, of long-term marketing, long-term customers, lifetime value. That's a big thing in common.
Sure.
And so that's why when I heard you were doing a podcast, I said I have to be on this podcast because
wow, that makes me feel great.
No, it made me feel great that you wanted me, and I jumped at the opportunity because I think that look, the chapter 10 of the book is basically titled the long game, playing the long game, and there's a quote right at the beginning of that chapter, and it's life is long. Marty Edelston said that, and not that Marty Edelston made up the term life is long, but it's a play on life is short. And look, I know how short life is. Believe me, interestingly, with my book, Over Deliver was launched on April 9th, 2019. On April 10th, 2019, I had a near fatal stroke. I came this close to death.
Wow. One day.
And so I know how capricious life is, but I always, in Marty's world and now my world, life is long because it's the only one you have. And it's one that you build in all the relationships, you build in as much as you can. And it's always there. And the idea that there are so many things that renew and get reborn within that life, that's what makes it long. And I've written a lot about this in my blog. I have a bunch of different blogs, different variations on between my stroke and other things that, different things that made me realize why life is long. And then that's where I got into the idea of, contribute to connect instead of networking. The idea that, the idea of giving 100-0 in your relationships, and everything is not like reciprocity in the online marketing world is a different definition than the definition I grew up with. Reciprocity to me is, it's closer to what Cialdini calls, in the ethical laws of influence, principles of influence. Reciprocity is, be the first to give concessions, be the first to contribute, and then it's you, then me, then you, then me. But it's a constant reciprocity, not just a matching, not just 50-50 or meet me halfway. I don't play that game. I've never played that game, and so so the subtitle of the book, Build a Business for a Lifetime Playing the Long Game in Direct Response Marketing. I could have just called it Over Deliver. Make sure you know what you're doing with memberships and renewals. I could have said that. I could have said, make sure you convert on all of on your new business. I could have had a lot of other things, but that's what it means, but that's how you build a business. I always say that, John Carlton, great copywriter, always used to say a promotion is not a business. Like he used to warn the people that had this killer promotion that went on ClickBank and were making all this money in affiliates. but they only had one promotion and one product. So he always said that promotion is not a business. You've got to do multiple promotions and then create other products. And then the other thing, I think it was a guy from the UK. His name escapes me. He said a product is not a business. And that's when you go on Shark Tank and you see, a lot of the businesses that the sharks bid on are just products.
Right.
But the ones that get the biggest deals are the ones that have the cross promotion aspects, and not that the ones that the inventor, the entrepreneur is dreaming, like pipe dreaming about stuff, but that there's obvious cross-sell, upsell opportunities within a brand of some sort, and all of that. So that's all about not a product not being a business. Now, a product can be a business. The potty seat thing that made millions of dollars. That was a product, but I bet they have other baby products now too.
Yeah,
so,
probably.
There's a quote in one of the classic direct marketing books that I used. It's written by Bob Stone. It was called Successful Direct Marketing Methods, I believe is the exact title. Yeah, Successful Direct Marketing Methods. It's in like its 7th or 8th edition. And when I taught a semester of direct marketing in 1989 at my alma mater, Rutgers University, I used that book as my textbook. And in chapter 1, there's just a quote in there, very simple quote. And it says, it says direct marketing business, but you could say direct response marketing business can survive without repeat business. It's just, that was like a rule of thumb, from yesteryear, but you can put that on steroids now, right?
Yeah,
it's just,
right.
And so, but it's all related to playing a long game. It's all related to everything that you believe in, Tracy. That's like, being in a business that helps people create memberships is a great business to be in. It's a, I applaud you for what you built. I was amazed. You said you launched it, what, 14 years ago?
It almost 14 years ago. WishList Member was started in 2008. And
that's like, that's like the olden days, and the foresight that you and Stu McLaren had for memberships, and that was going to be a killer app in this business, and especially in the digital world. It was already big. We had, look, AARP was one of the biggest memberships of all time, right? So we had memberships. The Reader's Digest was kind of a membership. This National Geographic Society is memberships all over the place. But you had the foresight at a great time in the business, and your success speaks for itself. And that's because you were looking for clients and people who wanted to play a long game. So I knew that subtitle would resonate.
Yeah, and part of the thing with the long game, Brian, one of the things I read in your book that really spoke to me was you said that you were always able to sleep well at night. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, you could have got a better negotiation on this and stuff. But I think that when Stu McLaren was my previous business partner and co-founder. He's, if you haven't met him, he's the nicest guy in the world. And I know that you have met him, but we always were like, hey, we ultimately just want to play the long game and treat people right.
Yeah. I have some things. I'm going to write a blog post upcoming. But I have a lot of angles on this topic, but I was the bane of my staff's existence at Boardroom, because I would always, I'm not going to say I always gave a good deal, but I always gave a good deal.
Yeah.
And I never tried to squeeze the last dollar out of a deal. And so what's the downside of that? The reason I slept well at night, but I left some money on the table probably over time. And I'm okay with that. I would rather have, now again, you don't want to be a sucker. I'm not saying be a sucker. I'm not saying you have to hire lawyers sometimes to negotiate, all of that. But I'm not being naive as a businessman, but what I am saying is that, to squeeze every dollar out of every negotiation In fact, I had negotiations, especially with copywriters, where I was paying them a royalty. I told a story recently. I had a copywriter who was as good as the best copywriters I was working with, yet he was not getting a royalty. And his competitors who I was working with were getting big royalties.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually I went to this writer and said, so-and-so, Joe, not his name, Joe, you realize that you're like as good a writer as any writer that I'm working with, and you're underpaid for how I'm paying the other writers.
Wow.
Like nobody, I didn't do it immediately, I have to admit, because I felt I was getting a good deal. But then I said, no, I'm not sleeping at night. So as soon as I'm not sleeping at night, so I basically, not only gave him, it's not even giving him a raise. I gave him a royalty arrangement that he took to all of his clients. And I probably contributed millions of dollars to his bank account, justifiably, because he earned it, not because he didn't deserve it, because I made him aware of a compensation structure that he wasn't aware of at the time. I had one where, the one I'm going to write about coming up is about a woman that I worked for at Boardroom, who was my first boss at Boardroom. And she was the list manager. And so I was her assistant for only a year. And she went to another company. And she left, and that's how I became the list manager at Boardroom. But she went to another company, and the company she went to was a publishing company that had lists that had never been on the market before. And they were lists. They weren't like Boardrooms. They weren't, I wouldn't say they were mail order junkies, but they were really good lists. They were lists of people who bought like law and tax books through direct mail. So, and that you can tell lawyers and tax professionals are generally more affluent than the general public. They're buying through direct mail. They're buying these big, heavy, like volumes of, $100 and $200 books. You can see that the list would probably be very responsive to a wide variety of offers, not just in the tax and law area. So she negotiates a contract with them to put their lists on the market. That's the job she went to. She negotiated a contract to put their lists on the market, and she negotiated a royalty, a bonus structure that she's first in, right? And they gave it to her, and she got an amazing deal. And the first year the lists were on the market, she did an amazing job selling them to the tune of she made more than the CEO of the corporate entity that owned this company. Wow. It wasn't a public company, but it was a big corporate company. So in year 2, she comes back and says, okay, I got this last year. I want to get a raise next year on what I got. And they said, that's ridiculous. You made more money than anybody in the company, and you're just managing the lists. But it was like the mentality was, I made this, now I have to make this, as opposed to, God, I negotiated a deal that was so attractive. They had to keep to it. It was a contract. Yeah. And she didn't understand that the difference between a bonus and a windfall. She got a windfall. And when you get a windfall, you don't necessarily get a windfall the next year either, in this particular case. And so she didn't renegotiate. She negotiated a higher bonus. And of course, halfway through the second year, they fired her, because they could still fire at will. And so easy lesson there, right? I mean, take your money, in this case, take your windfall, bank it, invest it, whatever, but don't expect it the next year because now you have basically setting a baseline. So I did that with every negotiation. Every negotiation was to set a baseline. And if I overestimated the baseline, then I wanted some money back. If I underestimated it, I would give money back. I'd give more money to them. And I'd actually put that in the contract. It's kind of wishy-washy language for a contract. Yeah. But I always wanted it there just for the hell of it, because I knew I would keep to it. And that's what I mean by, how I slept well at night. But how I'm sure in most cases I left more money on the table than what I made over time. But you know what?
but you
Look,
continued to be in the game.
exactly. And you know what? 50 years from now, I'm dead, and whoever I negotiated with is also dead. So I
Yeah.
look at it that way. It's like, what's an extra $100,000 over 10 years, whatever it was, whatever it would be. I just, I don't have patience for it.
Well, speaking of good deals, Brian, I'm pretty sure the domain is overdeliverbook.com, correct?
Yes, yes,
And
it's a
so
good deal.
I mean, the book's like, I don't know, $20. It's worth way more than $20, but you have a system on there where you can just type in your receipt. Barnes and I bought mine from Amazon. I typed it in and opted in, and then the bonuses. I mean, it's like massive, massive amounts of bonuses for this book. It was
Yeah,
crazy.
so interesting to put it in your context, in the context of memberships. I'm asking them to become a member of my online family,
Yeah,
not just buy a book. And so
right.
how would I want to do that? And first of all, you title a book over deliver, you better over deliver on the bonuses.
Yeah.
So there are 11 bonuses on the site. Each one is more outrageous than the next.
Yeah,
And I
some
have things on there
great
like,
stuff.
yeah, it's great stuff. I have 2 PDFs of full books from 2 of the people I mentioned, 2, historic direct mail guys, Dick
Yeah.
Benson and Gordon Grossman. Gordon Grossman built the Reader's Digest in the 60s and 70s through sweepstakes. And Dick Benson was like the guy for direct mail during the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And so those 2 books, which are out of print, are both full PDFs on the site. Then I've got, talk about Jay Abraham, I've got 19 keynote speeches that Jay Abraham has given on that you can access from the bonuses. There's also a course that Jay created. Cost him like a couple $100,000 to create. He doesn't even sell it anymore, and he just gave it to me to
Wow.
put on the site, and you can access that. There's a swipe file from ads going back to 1900. There's a Dan Kennedy swipe file that he offered up at my Titans of Direct Response event in 2014. That was just a phenomenal swipe file of some of Dan's most impressive work. There's a live event on a digital live event of that I did with Perry Marshall, who's one of my heroes. The interesting thing about the site, I'll just mention this because I mentioned my stroke and I mentioned life is long and all of that. When I woke up from my stroke and I was alive, obviously, and I wasn't paralyzed because when I went down on my stroke, my whole right side went paralyzed. I couldn't lift my arm, and then I just passed out. So when I woke up in the
Wow.
hospital, I lifted my arm. I said, "Okay, I'm whole." And the next few months, actually, I started thinking about, because you can't help think about it, because the surgeon who performed took out the blood clot that caused the stroke in the hospital. He thought, he was surprised I survived. So when you get doctors telling you that how close I was to dying, you start thinking about it a little
Yeah, I
bit
bet.
more. And so I didn't want to think about legacy because legacy sounds like you're already dead. So I thought about like what would be my footprint. So obviously you think about the book, right? And the book
Sure.
came, and ironically the book came out the day before my stroke and all that. But as I thought it through, and I think I have a blog post, which is something like I did a blog post a year before my book came out. It was the view from above ground. And I did some stuff about death in there. This blog post after my stroke was the view from below ground, is what I called it. Kind of
Oh,
a little
wow.
morbid.
Okay. I'm
And
definitely going to check that out.
yeah, it was an interesting exercise. I didn't know what I was going to write. I just put the title in. That's what I do a lot with my blogs.
Hmm.
I said the view from below ground. What do I want to write about? And I wanted to say what would be my footprint, had I died. And all I could think about was a movie that I saw shortly before my stroke. It was a movie. It's called Coco, and it's a Pixar film. I don't know if you've seen it.
I didn't see it, but I heard about it.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
an amazing film. It's a children's film, but it's not one of those. It's a Pixar film, and it's about Mexican culture, and it's about Dia de Muertos, which is 2 or 3 days where in Mexico where they honor the dead. They celebrate the dead. They don't memorialize. They don't. It's not a somber holiday. They celebrate the dead. They remember the dead. And I won't be giving away the end of the film, but there's something in the film called the final death. And it's when you die, it's not your final death. Your final death is when you no longer remember. And so that made me realize that it wasn't that hopefully I'll be remembered, but it was like, then I started thinking about all the people in my life, some alive too, but a lot of them that are dead. I need to continually remember them. And we talked about before we turned the recording on about your thirst for direct marketing history. Well, I've got historical figures in my life, from, Gene Schwartz to Jim Rutz to, Bob Stone to Dick Benson, Gordon, all these greats of marketing and copywriting who are dead, who, if I don't remember them, they'll have a final death. And then I thought about the ones who are still alive, the ones who are on the page on overdeliverbook.com. There's Dan Kennedy and Perry Marshall and Gary Bencivenga, great copywriter. I have all of his Bencivenga bullets on there. So I realized that what my footprint was sort of like the homage to my mentors was what my footprint was, which then hopefully will get me remembered, but that wasn't the goal. But so it wasn't the book, but it was overdeliverbook.com. That was the footprint. So hopefully the internet won't go away, and that I'll have that, if I'm gone, my heirs will continually, renew the URL overdeliverbook.com with GoDaddy. And so that site will live on. And so it reverberates. So it's my book. Yes. So that's part of it. But the bigger part was that it reveres, Jay Abraham and Dick Benson, Gordon Grossman, and Perry Marshall. Mm-hmm. Some of them are alive. It wasn't like just all remembrance. So that was an interesting exercise I went through, in terms of, what it meant to almost die. And then how to reflect on it in a positive way. Because I believe in living your legacy as opposed to waiting for your legacy. And you're going to die at some point, and there'll be something remembered. But while you're alive, you can make a difference, and it's remembering the people that got you there.
That's really powerful, Brian. I do want to mention that on that bonus page after you buy the book, there's 3 videos, lost footage of Eugene Schwartz himself.
Yes.
And I was like, what? I had no idea that stuff even existed. So that's exciting. Hey, so we're coming up close to our time, and I did want to mention chapter 9 specifically, where you talked about continuity and LTV, lifetime value, for people who don't know. For anybody that's running a membership or a course, you talk about it in an interesting way with some of those lessons that you learned, where sometimes you were not making money until the 2nd or 3rd year on that.
Yes, that was the. I did a blog post on Dick Benson, who was he wrote a book called Secrets of Successful Direct Mail. The full PDF of that book is on overdeliverbook.com. But it's it's a little dated, but man, he's got 31 rules of thumb at the beginning of that book. They're all relevant in some way to online marketing, and he never did any online marketing. Believe it or not, you should. Anybody who buys the book and checks those out will agree with me. But Dick Benson, I did a blog post I called "Beware of the Bogeyman," BOGEY. But the bogey, it's not the boogeyman, it's the bogey. Okay. And Dick Benson, he didn't invent this, but he called it the bogey. And the bogey in subscription marketing was basically, it's not breaking even in year 1. It's how much can you afford to lose on your first subscription to make it back in some period of time, reasonable period of time that suits you in given your cash flow, given your renewal rates, given all of the things, given your cross sell promotion,
Right.
upsell dollars in terms of lifetime value. So when you do that, you get to market so much more. Now you can't be frivolous with that. You can't say, I'll make it back at some point. That's not a bogey. A bogey has to be calculated. And, we early on, we used to, calculate our bogey where we would get a subscription offer, we'd get the $39 in, and we would figure out, we could lose like $7 or $8 per subscription based on the renewal rate we were expecting. Also determining what lists you're mailing, because certain lists renewed at different levels. So we got very sophisticated with our bogey. So certain list categories had a bigger bogey than other list categories, believe it or not. And it was fairly scientific. We didn't want to get too exact with it, because if you get too tight with it, then you're going to end up losing money. And then cash is still king, and you still need to pay the rent and pay the electric bill and all of that. So it's an involved calculation, but I think you hit it on the head, what it really is, which is how much can you lose in year one to make it back in year 2, 3, 4, 5. Mm-hmm. And we actually, once we were able to accumulate a lot of cash to a tight bogey of like a 6-month bogey, make money back 6 months after to a year, where we got to a point we had so much cash in the bank, we went to like a 2-year bogey. So a new subscriber, we wouldn't make money back on that subscription for 2 years. We had all this cash in the bank already to pay for the media to get new subscribers who will pay us back in 2 years. So you can get there. It took a while. Believe me, it took a while. And we also got ahead of ourselves. Where we almost blew it is like, we let our ego get ahead of us. And we said, we want to get to 1 million subscribers to Bottom Line Personal. And to get to 1 million subscribers to Bottom Line Personal, we probably needed a 3-year bogey. And cash started getting a little tight all of a sudden. So we said, we pulled that back. We got to 1 million and said, this wasn't worth it. And we pulled it back. So you have to be careful with it. But it's basically just a way to calculate, and Rich Sheffrin, who's a great marketer, said to me once, he said, remember I said a promotion is not a business, a product is not a business. I would also say that you don't have a business, and this is from Rich Sheffrin, you don't have a business until you can pay for media, any kind of media, direct mail, Facebook advertising, TikTok, Google AdWords, whatever, until you can pay for advertising, and then you can get sales back that pay that advertising back in an appropriate amount of time and make it profitable. That's when you have a real business. For instance, if you have your whole business is based on affiliate marketing, you can have a business that way. Don't think your media is free, because you're paying half your product costs to get the media. And I'm not saying it's not a real business, but that should be one medium that you use, affiliate marketing. Google AdWords should be another medium you use. Display advertising could be another one. And each one has to pay for itself in some calculation that's meaningful for you and your business. So that's sort of the hook of the bogey. You can get fooled by it, and you don't want to get fooled by the bogey. But if you keep to the bogey, you will have a lot of success, and you'll have a business and then the idea of paid media. Everybody says, I don't want to do paid search. I want to do only organic search. But there's room for both. And being a cheapskate with media just for the sake of saving money, I don't think that's a long-term plan for growth, basically.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Well, Brian, you've been so gracious with your time. I did want to ask you one more question on this. I think it's so important. In the book, you talk about you really should learn from the masters. And we talked about a lot of the older books, and you don't want to, basically everybody that's teaching stuff probably learned from the masters at some point in time. So you don't want to learn from a student of a student of a student.
Right,
And
right.
so then a lot of people would say, oh, this is my book and this is all you need. But you ended it in a very interesting way where it's called further reading. And I counted like over 100 books in there. And I was like, oh, wow, I've read that one, that one, that one. A lot of good stuff that I still have to read. And then I got almost all the way down to the bottom. And I was like, The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein and Oh, the Places You Will Go by Dr. Seuss. The Giving Tree, I read that to my kids every single night when they were young and growing up. What do you think it was about those two books that you're like, okay, this is going to be impactful for people in marketing and direct response?
Yeah, that's it. You know, when Dan Kennedy, when I sent him my manuscript for and his endorsement of the book, he's on the back cover, and his endorsement blew me away. I cried when I got his endorsement.
Wow.
And he was giving me input on the book, and he said something like, "Your reading list is too long." It's like, and I ignored that because it was long for a reason. Because there's so many places to get knowledge, wisdom, application. I mean, something like The Giving Tree ties into, like, one of the books in my business books is Give and Take by Adam Grant. Talking about givers, takers, and matchers. The Giving Tree is like another, like, children's version, but it's for adults. It's like Coco. It's a children's movie that's not for children. The Giving Tree is not a children's book. It's a book you read to your children because they can understand it. But if you go a couple of levels deep, I always use the analogy I always gave was Bugs Bunny. When I was growing up, Bugs Bunny was the first cartoon I ever saw that always winked at you, to the adult who's watching, right? Because go back and watch Bugs Bunny cartoons. Yeah. It's like he says something and then he'll say something and he knows that the kids did not get that, but the adults did. Now, I'm not saying Shel Silverstein has a lot of stuff like that in The Giving Tree, but the lessons are universal. Yeah. But they tie into like business lessons that I learned in Give and Take by Adam Grant. The Places You'll Go, when I told you my journey of my three, in fact, I just went to a wedding recently, and during the bride and the groom's vows, they read a passage from the Places You'll Go.
Oh, nice.
It's not so much just to be forward thinking, but to stay. For me, the lesson would be, stay grounded in the present, because yesterday is history, tomorrow's a mystery. All you have right now is the present, and it's funny, the places you go, for me, what it meant for a business person, the entrepreneur that's always looking for the next big thing, like Dan Sullivan. I've been a strategic coach with Dan Sullivan for 8 years. And Dan Sullivan talks about the gap for entrepreneurs, which is the gap is where you are and where you want to go. But if where you want to go is the horizon, you can walk forever. You're never going to get to the horizon. Dan, the gap is where you are, and the horizon, that's the gap for entrepreneurs. But you have to go quarter by quarter, achieve some goals, make some headway, and then turn around and look at where you've been and where you are currently.
Oh, that's great.
And that is the key before you turn back around and keep walking. And so to me, that's where the Places You'll Go, using that as an example, is what that was the relationship to Dan Sullivan and the gap. And then, the other one that I have in there is The Emperor's New Clothes. How many people just, follow religiously a guru, and it kind of defies what we're talking about here in some ways, that, go to the masters and do what they did. I'm not saying you could do it blindly, You know, you adapt. And the fact is that even though like today's gurus might have been the student of the, as you said, the student of the student of the student, the fact that they can put a spin on it and create something for today's generation that they will use and it's actionable, to me, that's as valuable as the originator. Ryan Levesque or Stu McLaren, good examples. I mean, Ryan Levesque developing his quiz funnels. He didn't invent surveys and quizzes.
Right.
He just adapted it, and now he's the messenger for that, and it puts him not just on the map, but he's changing businesses and lives. Stu, you know, with his tribe and now his whatever he renamed it, I forget.
Membership experience.
Membership experience.
Yeah.
I like tribe, but
yeah,
little whatever. But you know, he developed a system for memberships that is forever, and he borrowed a ton of stuff. He admits it from Don Miller and you know StoryBrand and all of that.
Little bit of Jeff Walker mixed in there with the product launch.
Jeff Walker, Sideways Sales Letters, all of that, and PLF. There and Jeff Walker, you know, invented something, but Jeff Walker would be the first to tell you that it's all direct marketing principles using online marketing, which is a lot less expensive to give away your best stuff free. And that's how he kind of, in fact, he did a blurb for my first book, Advertising Solution. And he even said the day he realized that everything he was doing was all direct marketing was the day that the light bulb lit up in his head, you know? So, it's a good question. I appreciate you noticing those books because, you know, I got some grief for that from some people, but I wanted to make it. Look, I had at the time I had, you know, almost a 40-year career, and I haven't read every one of the books in my further reading cover to cover, but I own most of them, if not all of them, and I think they're all important for different reasons. And I wanted people to have I wanted a comprehensive list of books from masters, of books from not masters, of books from, you know, Hans Christian Andersen and Shel Silverstein.
Yeah.
And Dr. Seuss.
Well, it's a great list. And I saw that some of Russell Brunson's books were at the top. And
absolutely.
Russell's a great guy too. And he's the same thing. He said, I didn't make all this stuff up. I'm just great at compiling it all. So
yeah, he's more than a compiler though. He's a little modest when he says that because ClickFunnels is another thing. ClickFunnels like Tribe, like the Ask formula, like PLF, those are, you can say they're inventions. They're certainly innovations of older ideas, but he made all of them, them their own. And they are incredible contributions to the marketing community.
Well, I want to thank you again, and I would just highly recommend your new book, Over Deliver, and it's an incredible contribution to the marketing industry as well. So, Brian, thanks again for being here.
Thanks for inviting me.
All right. And again, we'll post all of these on our site at membershipsandcourses.com. Thanks again for listening with us.
Well, you made it all the way to the end of the podcast, and I appreciate that you listened to the thing in its entirety. I hope that you received a ton of value. We spent a lot of time to try to bring on the best guests as possible and really pick their brains to provide value to you. If you enjoyed the podcast, please leave us a 5-star rating and review. It goes a long way in helping us reach more people with these topics about memberships, starting an online business, online courses, and all of that. If you got a lot of value, then please even share this on your social media or tell a friend or a colleague about this, somebody who needs to hear what we just talked about. On top of that, this podcast is sponsored by WishList Member. WishList Member is a WordPress plugin that allows you to convert your WordPress site into a fully functioning membership site where you can sell online courses, digital products, and the like. If you want to learn more, visit wishlistmember.com/free, and you'll get tons of free membership training, tons of valuable stuff just like you got from this podcast. It's just one of the efforts that the WishList Member team is doing. With that being said, thanks again. Take care.